I had a thought. I remember playing through a VR game called The Runner. It's like this anime themed, like Akira kind of game where you're like on a motorcycle trying to escape the authorities and you're kind of like, you know, in a sense, endlessly driving down like this giant highway trying to escape. So, anyways, I'm playing the game and it occurred to me, it feels a lot like this old NES game I used to play called Spy Hunter, which is basically the same thing. You're in a car, driving down this endless road, fighting enemies and getting power-ups, right? And so I played the game and I had this moment, this epiphany in regards to VR. That there's no need to worry about the future of VR. We see all the articles about VR being dead, right? Well, yeah, anyone who actually is like in the community knows that's crap. But then, on the opposite spectrum of that, I see those in the community who are ever trying to find a way to make VR like break into the mainstream. Like if we only did this, then everyone would play VR. If we only advertised it like this, everyone would play VR. If we only had games as comparable to AAA mainstream gaming, then everyone would play it. If we only did this, if we only did that, if we only did this, if Sony only marketed more, if you know all these things, I hear it, and I'm not saying any of them are wrong. I mean, yeah, they all make valid points. But to be honest, we really don't need to worry about it. And I say this because what I'm seeing in VR, I saw paralleled with the gaming back when I was a kid. An example. I see some people in the VR community rail on the VR developers for not making games as polished and as, say, advanced as like the mainstream gaming. They'll look at games coming out for the flat screen and say, well, why can our VR games have that? Why do our VR games have all this quote unquote jank? Or why can't they be as refined, as polished, as consistently good as mainstream gaming, right? Because they look at look at mainstream gaming, they compare it and they say, well, VR is lacking. But you have to understand that, and I'm sure they understand, logically, but you have to understand is that gaming didn't start with The Last of Us. You know what I mean? Gaming didn't start with Ghost of Tsushima or Horizon Zero Dawn or Death Stranding or whatever AAA huge budget game you want to compare it to. Gaming didn't start with Call of Duty Modern Warfare. Like that's not where gaming began. I remember gaming back in the Atari days, the Master System, I should say, the Master System, Sega, and the NES. I remember those days. I had the NES. I had the Sega. And in those days, but the gaming, as much as we loved it back then, gaming couldn't keep up with any kind of other mainstream medium. You know what I mean? It couldn't keep up with the storytelling of movies, with the cinematography of movies. The musical score of movies far surpassed anything you'd get on an 8-bit cartridge. Not to say the music was bad, because we loved it. We appreciated it for what it was. But compared to other forms of media, video games back in the 90s and the 80s was incomparable, couldn't keep up. The difference, though, what made gaming so incredible, was that it was interactive. We actually got to play the game as opposed to just passively watch it. Right? And so, in the 90s especially, because I remember this clear as day, there was this gradual progression in gaming from 8-bit to 16 to 64 to polygons to fully rendered cutscenes in the PS1, and like it was growing And eventually it reached a place when gaming got so good that people couldn't deny it any longer. That even the mainstream, even the people who ridiculed us, because I hate to say this, gaming is cool nowadays. You know what I mean? Gaming is like a mainstream thing nowadays. Back when I was growing up, gaming was not mainstream. I mean, you were a nerd, you were a loser, you were a dumbass, you were lazy, you were a freaking, you were a nobody. If you played gaming, like, I don't know, back in those days, we didn't walk around talking about the cool things we did in gaming unless you were part of a group of gamers. A group, and we call ourselves nerds back then. We weren't freaking gamers. It wasn't a mainstream thing, alright? It wasn't a mainstream thing. I remember when I was working at GameStop, and the first time I saw a jock come into the shop, you know what I mean, and buy a game, and I was like, what the hell are you doing here? Like, what the hell? This ain't your place, brother. What the hell are you doing here? And so eventually gaming got to that place. It was about, in my recollection, it was about the PS2 time. During the age of the PS2, gaming got to a place where graphically it was undeniably good. The storytelling was undeniably good. The control scheme was undeniably good. We were reaching a place where, like, people on the outside who used to ridicule gaming were taking notice and saying, "Damn, that actually looks pretty good." You know what I mean? By the time Halo came out for Xbox, people were like, "Well, damn, that actually looks kind of good. That actually looks kind of cool." By that time, you know, we had Madden that had some freaking sick looking graphics by then, and games were looking good. They were undeniably good, to the point where even the mainstream, even people outside who used to ridicule it, you know, if you catch the parallels I'm making, started to notice. So, eventually, VR will reach that place when the games coming out will consistently be so good, so undeniably good, that even the haters and the people on the outside will look at it like, "Oh, damn, that looks kind of sick, actually. That looks really good." And so we don't need to be worrying about it. We don't need to be scheming to try to get people into the fold, into the VR community. The VR community is good. What we need to do right now is just enjoy the journey. Like we did back in the 90s. We enjoyed the journey. We enjoyed every new game that came out, and every new leap in innovation, every new game brought to the table. We enjoyed the journey until eventually we reached a place where now gaming is where it is now. Now all the other forms of media are following gaming, trying to take their stories and convert them to a passive format where it can reach even more people. So VR is good. Don't worry about a thing. It started off much like the NES, much like gaming, with like simple concept games with like the wave shooters and the short-term experiences, and eventually we had the rail shooters. Every game was a rail shooter. And as time has gone on, VR has been refined. Back in the early days of game, I remember playing on the 64, for instance, and every first-person shooter you played on the 64 played different. You know, man, there was no universal control scheme, as it were. When you played Turok and then went to GoldenEye, two different control schemes. Unless you changed it, it was completely different. And then you went to Doom, completely different. And then you went to Dakota, completely different. Like, every game had its own little control scheme. It's not like nowadays where you pick up an FPS and it's always the same. Always sprint, always jump, always shoot, always aim. It wasn't like that. It wasn't like that back then. And so much like VR now. VR is reaching a place now where we're getting some pretty standardized controls now. We go into a brand fresh new game, and it's you know, I mean, developers are learning. Developers are knowing how to utilize VR to its advantage. So those in the community, don't worry. We're gonna reach the place. We're gonna reach a place soon. We're gonna realize when you're gonna see people who used to condemn VR as being a waste of time are slowly, folding into the fold. And to be honest with you, if I had to give a props to something in the community that's really kind of elevated it, it'd have to be Sony. As much as hate as it gets, the VR2 is really the main. It's gonna be that thing, that variable that pushes VR into that AAA mindset, that AAA space. The games on the VR2 are so good looking, so clean, so undeniably better in many respects than to the flat screen counterparts that you gotta see people start noticing. So, to my fellow VR enthusiasts, just enjoy the ride, guys. We'll see the fruition of it all in the end. Alright, thanks for listening.